But of course, bush living was bush. You totally took most of your things from the land you're on. We just lived on the land as people of the land. To us, it was a natural way of being. Being part of all that there is was just the way you was. You didn't see anything any different from you. It was just a way of life that was inclusive of all that there is through life. Life is the binding and the connecting way the oneness is. If you're alive, you connect to everything else that is alive. But that oneness included everything that was around us, and you was raised with that teachings from a child upwards. Part of land which has been handed down to you by your ancestors, we say the granny law, has given me my responsibility now that I'm grown up to care for my country, care for my mother, care for everything that is around me, the oneness, the completeness of that oneness. To be responsible in both caring, in every single way, which we call the kanyini, caring with unconditional love, with the responsibility. You feel that so well, that you feel good when you're in that space, and you kind of feel you're living with family when you include everything that is alive in that space. And that it's a huge space, and there's a lot of specimens of everything you can possibly imagine there with you. And then you grow up knowing that these are all your family. You can never feel lonely in that situation. You just can't. How can you when all around you is family members, from this ground up to all the trees around you, to the clouds hanging up around you, the birds flying by, the animals and reptiles that are just hidden in the shrub there for now, but can come out if they want to, hunt around for their little food, and then they can become food for us as well. It is a beautiful way of being. It doesn't push anyone out, but it brings everybody in. And the completeness of being who you are, where you are, is a really good feeling. And it's a beautiful feeling. I wouldn't exchange it for anything. That's why I'm here, right beside all of it. I am so lucky.
This Aborigine gentleman makes it look so natural to live in harmony with nature. He's the epitome of someone living in a state of oneness. But what about the rest of us? Why is it so difficult for modern people to gain access to these experiences? Ravi, any ideas?
Part of this goes back at least to the 16th century, when the whole idea of nature was a mechanization of nature. That the nature is like a big machine, and we can study it like a machine, etc. And then a kind of a separation of ourselves from what we study. In spite of the great glory of science, one has to also realize that it has a way of going about knowing something which separates the knower from what is known.
In a way, it is the product of a patriarchal culture that says God is in heaven, he is not on earth, so it doesn't matter what happens to the earth. The earth is a province of human beings who are the lords of the earth to do with what they will. And this has caused a devastation, and what is not understood, I think it's really important, this has caused not just an ecological devastation, but also a devastation to the soul. Because the soul is traditionally the place of connection between heaven and earth. That is the symbols, the archetypes, this inner world of the creative imagination. And we have wreaked havoc in the outer world. We have polluted it. We have laid waste to it. And we have also polluted the inner world of the soul without even knowing what we are doing, because we no longer honor the sacredness of everyday things and that connected us to life. And life is something extraordinarily sacred.
At the root of it, it is the same divine energy from which everything is coming. And the understanding, as it is actually said in India, Brahma is not in everything, it is everything. That understanding. Now, the incident that I was going to describe to you, this used to be one of the pleasures of my father, who was a very distinguished lawyer, and he read something from the Bhagavad Gita. And now I can tell you in Sanskrit. At that time, I was neither interested in this, I was just simply standing there, surely purely out of politeness. But it still left a very great mark on my psyche, and that's the reason I'm mentioning this now here. And this verse is from the Bhagavad Gita, in which Krishna actually says that at the end of many lives, a wise person comes to me, realizing that all there is Krishna. Realizing that all there is God. And then he goes on to it, such a person is great-souled, but very rare. And so my father reads this out in Sanskrit. I can even now really hardly recall this without getting moist-eyed, because it had such feeling. And here is a very distinguished person, highly regarded in the society, and of course for us young boy, he was practically like a godlike figure, as fathers often are. And he says, you know, Ravi, I could tell you the words, what it says, but I can't tell you the reality behind this. I don't know it. And then he said, I wish for you that in your life you will meet people and teaching that will help you to know the essence of this verse. All there is Krishna.
Yeah.
And this has been really for me a lifelong project.
That's beautiful. From that moment. And yeah,
does it touch something in you?
I mean, everything is He. This is the,
yeah.
This is, wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God. And it is, the Sufis call it Baka. On the Sufi journey, there is the stage of fana, which is the dissolution of the dying to the ego, to the separate self. And then you awaken, or you in the state of Baka, which is abiding in God. And in that state, you are in the living presence of God, not as some separate entity, not as some being in the sky, not as some idea.
That's just an image people have of God.
But as a living presence, as that is in everything, around everything, beyond everything. And, say for the Sufis, he is our beloved, so it is a love affair, it is a relationship of love with everything that is. And just to look, for example, to look into the eyes of somebody and see not just a separate person, but your beloved looking back at you in a different form. And you come to know him in his creation. The Sufis say you cannot know God in his essence. They say he is beyond even your idea of the beyond. No one knows God but God. So how do you come to know him? You come to know him how he reveals himself in his creation. So for the mystic, this creation is a way to know God. It is a way to play with God. It is a way to be with God, to be alive with God. And that is really the purpose of life. It is this hide and seek with the divine.
It seems then this journey to oneness is a paradox. On one hand, it's as natural as breathing. Yeah. On the other hand, we're humans, so it's an ordeal. What role then do meditation, prayer, and yoga play in this journey? You took a very
good example of breathing. We are breathing all the time, but if you actually become aware of this fact, it changes the quality of your breathing. You cannot not breathe. But now, the moment you become actually aware of this is one of the standard meditational practices. But it doesn't matter. But if you just, right now, if one just becomes a little aware of this, first of all, inevitably, breathing deepens and it becomes more, one might really say harmonious or smoother. And that change in the quality of breathing brings in substances which really, if one is not totally timid about all this, one would simply say they are more all chemical substances, which we don't ordinarily breathe. Transformation of being has to do with a qualitative shift, not a quantitative shift. I remember a conversation with Krishnamurti in which I actually specifically had this conversation on which I was trying to bring this point, which he thoroughly agreed with, that a new consciousness requires a new body. And a new body is partly generated by a different quality of breathing.
That is correct. That is completely correct.
So you took a very good example. That it is like breathing. I agree. So oneness is like breathing, except that when we begin to pay attention to it, if you like, our quality or the quality of our relationship with it changes. Whatever I pay attention to changes in its quality. Breathing is a good example of this, but that's the most obvious example. If I begin to pay attention to my soul, the quality of my soul will change. So you see, attention is the power of transformation.
Conscious.
Yeah, well, it's a consciousness, attention is its chief feature.
Yeah.
And so I would even say that what we need in a way to learn, and this is partly a matter of practice, but partly everything is a matter of grace. This I said earlier too, but one can begin to see what stands in the way. If he's saying something, and if I'm just meanwhile weaving my own stories, so I can't hear what he's saying. So what stands in the way of my listening to him there's nothing wrong with my ears. The words are coming in. If I actually want to listen to him, what I primarily need to do is actually not to listen to him. I need to listen to all the noise in myself, which will then, because I pay attention to it, it silences. It's actually almost a mistake to try to place my ears like this, as if there's nothing wrong with my ears. Of course, if there is a trouble with the ears, that's a different matter. Then I need a hearing aid. But otherwise, what I really need, if I wish to actually hear somebody, you ever watch a Zen master? If you say something to them, their eyes are closed. They're listening from their belly.
I just like first to say something. That is really the next step that we need to take. I always say the wisdom of the doctor and the shaman should come together, of the scientist and the mystic, because really we are seeing the same reality from different perspectives, and we each have something to give us. We can't go back to to that pristine world of the hunter-gatherer. We can't lose the fruits of science. There are too many people on the planet. We need the fruits of science, but we need to use them in a holistic way, in an understanding of all the interconnectedness and all the wisdom that, for example, a mystical appreciation of oneness can give.
Ravi, what do you think? Are we focusing on the same thing?
It is not. Niels Bohr, a very great physicist of the 20th century, made this comment that it is wrong to think that physics speaks of nature. Physics speaks of what we can say about nature.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that science has cut us off from direct experience?
Exactly.
Because from a mystical point of view, direct experience is what life is all about.
Exactly. Non-mediated by the mind.
Right.
Direct experience.
But there was, you see in shamanic traditions, there was a time when they learnt their wisdom, their knowledge, their science from direct experience, from a oneness, for example. The shaman learnt the properties of plants through being one with the plant, and the plant actually communicating its healing properties. So that there is a tradition of belonging to indigenous people of science that belongs to oneness, and maybe science can grow up and go from this view of everything having to be separate and isolated.
Yeah, again, this is a very important point that Leland has just made. We have to have a certain amount of faith that there is some order to be discovered. Otherwise, we'll never get around to doing any science. So even that science and faith are not opposed to each other. Nobody could actually proceed with any scientific research without a kind of a conviction, if you like, or a trust that there is an order in the universe.
let's turn now to a different perspective on oneness. This is a film clip from Ecuador.
He sido, soy y seré siempre un rebelde. De frente a la autoridad, toda mi vida la he dicho lo que he creído que debo decirle, lo que encuentro coherente con el poder que tenemos y lo que no lo encuentro coherente al poder que podamos haber llegado a tener. Yo creo que nosotros muchísimas veces cuando nos creímos dueños, poseedores de una posición alta, de una posición mayoritaria, no hemos perdido toda esa delicadeza, toda esa ternura, toda esa entrega que tuvo Cristo y que la sigue teniendo como fe para con el más necesitado. El poder endurece. ¿No crees tú que una de las grandes crisis de la humanidad es que haya perdido valor la palabra nosotros? No haya nostridad en la vida, hay comunidad, hay yoidad, egoísmo, hay tuismo, tú acusado de todo, yo, el dueño de todo, pero nunca se habla de nosotros. ¿Cuál es la auténtica, cuál es la verdadera religión? La auténtica y la verdadera religión es la que da culto a un auténtico y verdadero Dios. ¿Cuál es el auténtico y verdadero Dios? El auténtico y verdadero Dios está en tu corazón con toda sinceridad, en tu corazón y está en el corazón del otro y está en la mente de todos. Si todos nos acercamos a Él con la misma sinceridad, llegaríamos un día a la unidad absoluta de religiones, porque aquel a quien adoramos es uno solo. Cada religión tiene su modo de buscar esa unidad. Tenemos que ponernos de acuerdo todas las religiones para encontrar la unidad de actitud frente a ese Dios que sería ya la unidad de religiones en el mundo. Ese es el ideal cristiano, ese es el ideal de todas las religiones, ese es el ideal de todos los caminos, ese es el ideal de todos los caminantes. No hay caminos, cada uno hace el camino al andar, y al andar ¿hacia dónde? Hacia adentro, nada más que hacia adentro. Y cuanto más adentro te vas, más te abres al infinito.
The Archbishop here says that every religion has its own way of achieving this experience of oneness. And then he goes on to say, paraphrasing the great Spanish poet Machado, everyone has to make their own path. There is no way or path. What do you think?
This Archbishop is really much to be commended. I think he's wonderful in what he's saying. But as he also pointed out himself on the film, that he's a rebel. Because the moment this is why I often feel that it is very important to separate religion from any spiritual discipline or spiritual practice. Religions are generally not interested in spiritual discipline or practice. And the corresponding part of the religion here will be the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church. He is a bishop of the Roman Catholic Church. Extra ecclesias nulla salus. Outside the church, there is no salvation. You talk about oneness.
How can you?
You see, that is religion. It is really important for us not to just be so wishy-washy about this, As long as this tendency remains, us and them, we have the real jewel here, the others are just in illusion, which is not what this Archbishop is saying. So this is why he is a rebel. And in fact, I'm surprised that he hasn't yet been asked to leave the church, because it's really the tragedy of religion. So it's not that we have cheapened love only, we have cheapened religion.
I think it is fundamental to realize that deep within each of us, we have a yearning for oneness. And then you begin to make this journey, and some people make it more seriously, some people make it more intensely than others, which is, the Sufis call it simply the journey home, the journey back to God, the journey back to the source, the journey back to oneness. And the beautiful thing is really all of humanity, in fact, the whole of creation, as Ravi said earlier, is longing for oneness, wants to make that journey, either consciously or unconsciously.
Llewellyn, do you see any other models in our time? You have written and spoken beautifully about the internet.
Well, we've been talking about the individual inner journey towards oneness. Now, I'm a mystic, and I have spent much time in meditation. And you can go into meditation to a certain plane of consciousness where you see that everything is one and everything is interconnected. And the fact that any individual anywhere in the world can plug in and they're immediately connected to this web of interconnectivity, that is how consciousness of oneness really functions, through interconnectivity. And one thing that the mystics have always understood, that real evolution is not the evolution of buildings, it's not the evolution of science, it's the evolution of consciousness, how our consciousness evolves. That is really the key to evolution. And if you see the internet is actually a vehicle of consciousness. It isn't so much one person connecting to somebody else, it's the consciousness of the world coming together in a new way.
Ravi?
I think the internet, it's a very interesting comments that Llewellyn is making, and personally I also feel very strongly that we have not yet appreciated practically a whole revolution is going to be brought about and is being brought about by the internet. But as in every other force, we have to be very careful that it can be misused. What is the important realization is, if we begin to even to allow this possibility in our ordinary mind, even gradually it becomes a part of the heart. It's not that the body has the spirit, it's the spirit which has the body. It takes on a body for some purpose, and part of that is that therefore I am responsible to the purposes of the spirit. This would actually, every great tradition says this in slightly different ways maybe, but we don't ever realize this. We somehow think that the body is primary, and then somehow it has, if we even allow the spirit, we say, well, it has somehow evolved and has got the spirit in. This is the other way around.
There's a nice description. Somebody said that we're not human beings trying to have a mystical experience, we're mystical beings trying to have a human experience.
That's right.
And it's really, again, what is that human experience? What is it about? What are we here for?
We'd like to share one more articulation of this elusive concept of oneness. This time we turn to Tibetan Buddhism.
Jigyo Gunivade Yalia Jigyo de Ashe Jigyo Yong Jalia de Chevrichavo, Koto Yong Chevalia Doji Cheve Tonina and the Nibadley or something. Stanashi Yuchon Shindana, we need to Mabuchi, Nasi, Turkey, Tomba Chevi Bilia, Bija, and then Jigyu, and then Jinyom, and Kunjum Samukian, and the Losutan, done it again to begin. Yes, we are. Cheers, Daddy. How should I say? You are dog. Dry, you are don't go. Ni some kind of deal. You are dry, you are don't go. They are the me. You cheer now. You are doing. You are dirty. Me chelia. How should I? Tajime, which is payment to Timothy. That's a 2 months. Sana. Ni some kind of you are the Tunde. And then the telephone. 최다 대도 될었는데 아니 참지 안아서 남지 디디 인디산에 이내양 아주 그냥 아주 이치 로빈 중에는이야 이렇게 최초들에는 저도 매번 저분이야 잡아차 아주 잡아야 성부 샤도이나 아주 저분이야 에너지 이 아주 럭수 비야가 아주 그 최초로
The 17th Karmapa says that just studying religion is no longer enough. Now we need to ultimately reconnect with the rest of the world. Do you agree with that?
Completely. Traditionally, the mystics went into the desert, went to hermitages in the mountains, and now we're needed in the marketplace of life because life is dying. Because this crazy culture of exploitation and greed and consumerism and commercialism is destroying the fabric of life, the fabric of the soul. And something is needed to come back into the marketplace of life.
No, we need to love our world. This is our world. And I'm responsible for this. At the birth of each one of us, there is such agreement from subtle forces and laws, some of which we know, some almost certainly we don't know anything about, are all playing in there. Which means that it's not that I have somehow crashed this cosmological party. I belong here. This recognition is very necessary that I could not possibly be here without the agreement of the higher forces. Therefore, I am a wanted child of the universe. Precisely because of that, it is a family business. I belong here. I need to take care of this.
Beautiful.
So a sense of responsibility actually naturally arises if I recognize that I belong here. But there is in fact, if I seriously recognize this, it takes away all fear of death. I say this quite seriously. People are afraid of death because they have somehow a feeling they have crashed this party and they'll be found out and they'll be kicked out. If I belong here, I've been brought here, and I'll be naturally taken away. There'll be other parties. So I think if I realize that I can't possibly be here without these forces, then I'm naturally a wanted, needed, loved child of the cosmos, therefore responsible.
Yeah, I agree.
Wonderful. Thanks. Llewellyn, as a mystic, where are we going as a species? Have you had a glimpse or a vision of where we're going?
Yes, I have been given a glimpse of what is possible for humanity. Oneness is really a quality, a way of being, and that it can be given to us, but as Ravi said, we have to make this step away from ourselves, away from our self-interest, or as the bishop said, to go from the I to the we. It is a very, very simple step to step away from oneself, to embrace the whole. And yet, for some reason, it is the most difficult step that human beings seem to be able to make.
Ravi, as a scientist, what does the future hold?
I think the future, generally, I'm quite optimistic, but not stupidly. I think there are grave dangers. One is just the catastrophe that looms. This may, sometimes that is needed, you know. Hell needs to loom ahead of us to see that we could live otherwise. If we see the terror of this situation, then something else is looked for. And I don't think we need to go very far to see signs of terrible things. And could be economic disasters, certainly ecological disasters. Global warming is a good illustration of the disasters looming. More and more scientists are speaking about it. If the glaciers were really to melt as much as is being predicted by many ecologists, China and India, now this is more than half the world population we are talking about. China, or nearly half the world population, just within these two countries, they're going to suffer enormously because all their rivers are fed by these glaciers in the Himalayas. So my impression is that this kind of looming catastrophe is itself going to give us pause, whether we are heading in the right direction. But I am myself probably very much in harmony with Leland here. Ultimately, it is all in the hands of God. And if it is even necessary for us to be destroyed, even that, I think one should not really forget, we do our part. Whatever our projects, that without God, it cannot be done. Without human beings, it will not be done. So we need to do our part. But unless we have connection with God, nothing will be done.
Beautiful, beautiful. By now, I think the viewers have a pretty good idea about the parallels and correspondences in your worldviews. To cite a wonderful metaphor in your writing, Ravi, we're all pilgrims walking up the mountain slope, and sometimes we do meet each other. So imagine the two of you as pilgrims walking up that mountain slope, seeing each other on your own personal quests, your pilgrimages. What do you say to each other?
I think this meeting has been that
Exactly
coming
that.
together of
Yeah.
these two streams that are different and yet the same. And to me, that is a real celebration of oneness in its deepest sense.
And actually, another thing I would say, which is actually in fact happens when pilgrims meet on a mountain slope, which is quite different. Then somebody can ask, did you run into some crevasses that I need to be careful about? You know, the kind of, or were there some particular chasms or some particular glaciers that, or there is a fire ahead? You know, this is actually the kind of exchange that pilgrims can have and need to have.
But for me, deeper than that, there is what I would call a celebration of oneness. You see, you think we are two separate people who have met. From a perspective of oneness, we are just aspects of oneness that at a moment in time, well, all of us have come together. And what, in a way, moved me most deeply was when Ravi said, it is all up to God, because that was something that I know and feel and yet was for certain reasons reluctant to say, because in a way, it is the most controversial, the most dramatic thing one can say in this culture today. And so I was so grateful that Ravi said it. And I thought, that was the missing piece to finish everything, because for some reason I was hesitant to say it. And yet that to me, as a mystic, it's all up to God. It is His will.
But we have to do our part.
We are doing our part now, just being together and sharing it.
I agree. But ultimately, oneness or real love or divine love, if you like, or truth, it always remains a mystery. It drives the arts, drives the sciences, drives philosophy. But this mystery can never be solved. What it calls for is celebration. Physicists celebrate this by doing physics. Philosophers do this by philosophy. Musicians by music. Artists by art. Everybody celebrates, but it always remains a mystery.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Ravi Ravindra. Thank you, Llewellyn Vaughan Lee, for sharing your thoughts, your reflections, your pilgrim spirit on what is a very elusive topic, that of the journey to oneness. But I think the spirit that's been revealed here is very much in sync with the spirit of this show. We're not yearning after any one singular answer on this program of Global Spirit. Instead, we're trying to encourage the many conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ravi.
Thank
Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating a little towards the Rosies through PayPal or Patreon. Links are in the description below. Thank you very much.